Welcome to the Women and Money Cafe so far. And today we are joined, Julie, Michelle and I, by the lovely Giselle Galper, who is a self-confessed obsessed about the connection between money and career. So Giselle, introduce yourself, please.
Thanks so much. I'm Giselle Galper, the founder of Chea Seed, and I'm building a career app to help people earn more and advance faster and maybe even love their careers. And I'm doing this because I look at the gap for women, and I live in the United States, the gap in earnings, the underemployment of women, and just the number of costs that women have that men don't have. We live longer, we spend more on our things, they actually cost more, and we have higher expectations of health and hygiene. And yet we earn less money. And so I want us to earn more money so we can have more money for retirement, we can have more choices. And finally, when women have money, the data shows that we give back more to our communities. So it's pretty powerful putting that extra money in women's hands.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's very similar to something Melinda Gates said, isn't it? That in the hands of women, we do more good with money. That's no offense to any gents who are listening to the sofa, but I do think there's a lot of truth in that if I look at the people that we work with. I love the name Chea Seed, not only because I'm a vegetarian and usually see them in my diet. So tell us a little bit more about how that name came about.
Well, I really wanted something that evoked the idea that our app, this career app, was going to be easy to use. And Chea Seeds, urban folklore has it that they're energizing and empowering. And of course, they're very tiny, but you do a lot of them. So it was this idea of tiny actions. And then oddly enough, perhaps because I'm a lawyer and I'm always looking for acronyms and abbreviations, Chea is Career Helping Expert App, CHEA. And so came the name Chea Seed. And I'm glad that you like it. When I first came up with the idea, a lot of people said, that's very strange. But for me, I really wanted to invoke this kind of superfood of career idea. And because there isn't another product to compare our app to, it's nice to be able to simply say it's career helping, because most people think the app will be about job search. And although we could add that in, this idea of helping people with search, the idea is most people need help on the job where we spend most of our time. Just like at breakfast, you throw chia seeds into your food or you let them soak overnight. We need to take care of our careers on an ongoing basis.
I mean, I don't know whether Julie and Michelle have got any thoughts on this with any differences culturally, but it does feel that even in the UK, I can go and do a job search, but then I'm in my job. So unless the training's on the job, there's not a great deal kind of goal focused or pay focused or support on, from my perspective as a woman, in progressing myself, because, and we talked briefly before, that you need more money coming in before we can do good things with savings, investments, pensions, and actually getting ourselves to financial freedom. Is it something you've seen, Julie or Michelle, in this country?
No, I don't know. Not something I've seen.
The thing that got my attention is, Catherine and I did a previous episode where we got quite ranty about asking for a pay rise.
Quite right.
And it is one of the most common things that different advisors and different women will come to me about. I've got my appraisal coming up. And it's like, I find it really patronizing when you got all this chat about, well, if women just skip their Starbucks 2 times a week, then they will have an extra $10 or £10. And you're like, yeah, I'd rather have another 10 grand pay rise, please, because that will accelerate women acquiring wealth a lot quicker than cutting back on your Costa or your Starbucks. And Giselle, I love what you're doing, because the more we can empower women in their careers so that they feel confident to go in there and demand that they get paid a fair wage, then that kind of just builds a perfect platform or foundation to propel things. And I wish I'd had something like that earlier in my career. I don't know about you, Michelle. What would it have been helpful to you 20 years ago?
Certainly. I think I've been employed up until a couple of years ago, and I think in every role I've had within financial services, the male counterparts have been paid more than the female. And that was seen as normal. You weren't seen to question it, particularly when I was sort of in my 20s. You know, why would you question that? They're the men, that they know how to do the job properly. And we're sort of almost playing at it. That's what's almost given by how it's treated. And I think as years have gone on, things have changed, but that conversation is still difficult, I think, for many, many people. So to have something that can guide you and help you to being able to go in and, as you say, Julie, demanding that pay rise, all the better.
I remember interviewing for a role where we had 2 men and 2 women who had come for the role. All were probably fairly equally qualified and experienced, yet both men asked for the upper range of the salary and both women asked for the lower range. Now, there was a range. They could have asked or picked any number, but both women asked for the lower range. And they gave the role to one of the gentlemen. So they were never going to make a selection based on how much was asked. So is some of this cultural? Is this some of us putting our own caps on? And if someone was to say this to you, Giselle, what kind of advice would you give to them to go in confidently and pitch right for them?
Well, there's a lot of data that suggests that men are promoted and advanced on potential and women on experience. And this is why in building this career app, we're not just doing this micro coaching with sort of tap through interactions and learning. We're very focused on what I'm calling career fitness tracking, but it's writing down what you do and nudging people to do that, because there are, to unpack your questions, are really 3 questions. One is, how can you just go in with what you have today or in the next month and ask for more money? So in the app, we go sort of through this we have an ask for more pay, negotiate your job offer, and a performance review program. So they're all slightly different, but they all come down to what I, as a lawyer, call garnering your facts, gathering up your experience and what you've done and telling the story, and also do your homework, network, ask people what they make. Because one of the things that does empower women to ask for more, and there's a little bit of good research on this, is when women know what everybody else makes, they ask for the high end of the range. They actually do better in their personal negotiations. And so knowing what the market is and kind of stepping out of your identity silo. And by that, I mean, don't just ask women. Ask men, even if you don't know them well, ask them what the range is for a job. Say, oh, did you make between this and this? People who left the job before. Because if you don't have the information as a woman, it is harder to find that power. And if you don't write down what you do and know how great it is and have the ability to share it with someone else, that's the feature we're working on in the app now. So you could actually share your career record with someone who could help you talk yourself up and curate this. It doesn't have to be a coach. We all know if we go to our best friend or an old manager, they're going to find the value in what we did more than we find it ourselves. So that's what I'm hoping to grasp. We all have these little inner power circles. And if you have a coach and you can afford a coach for your career, more power to you. But if you have a friend or a mentor or an aunt or an uncle, that should be almost as good or maybe better because they know you. So that's asking for more pay, these big career moments. But I believe it's these little career moments along the way. I call it asking for what your career needs. So the idea is fairly simple. You'll be like, building into the app has been relatively hard, but it's very simple. Write down what you do. Learn to talk yourself up, squeeze in telling people the information you know and where you want to go, as long as like what you do. Network, doesn't have to be long networking. And in that networking and in your life, asking for the small things your career needs. Because when we say that those guys, they ask for the high end of the range, it's because they're comfortable doing that. So the best way to get comfortable, like anything else, is, most people don't jump into the cold pool. Some people do. They usually stick their toe in, right? Then their calf, then their knee, and then they slide in. And that's what we want to do in career. We want to slide in. We want to build these habits of asking for the small things, the extra training, the ability to shadow, being on a project. There was an article 3 years ago in the Wall Street Journal. I should tape it to my wall here because I look it up all the time. It said that even at firms like McKinsey and Procter and Gamble, where they're getting these really high flying potential graduates from business schools and undergraduates, that the women aren't necessarily being assigned the best projects out of the gate. On day one, right? Your day one project isn't as good. That affects your entire trajectory. But it's up to you to network and ask for those projects and the placement, because if we're promoted, right, and advanced and hired on experience, we have to get that experience. And then we have to tell people about it. So I see it as like, right, you ask for what your career needs, big things, you're prepared, but also along the way, you're dipping your toe in the water and you're asking for these small things and you're doing it repeatedly, which is why we call this career fitness tracking, because we want to encourage these behaviors, which some people do naturally. They're like really great at it. But the problem is most of us, including myself, we're not trained to do these things. And most women are actually trained to wait, right? To be good girls, do a good job, and it will come. I can't tell you, I bet you've heard this from your clients. I should have gotten that promotion. I should have gotten that opportunity. I was the best one. And they totally were. But they needed to get online and ask. I mean, online, like in queue for their manager or whatever. Like, you've got to ask. And then one of the things that women also don't do is they don't ask people to support them. So if you want a promotion, you've got to find someone you worked with and tell them, I want that promotion. Will you support me? Will you tell Bob I should be the one for the promotion? Because you need billboards, right? It's not just about the ask. These articles about asking for more make me crazy. Okay, and now here's the final tip. When you get a no, which you are likely to get, even though if you ask a random person on the street for help, they're likely to tell you yes. But often what people hear in career is what I call a conditional yes, which is a no. When we have budget, when it's the blank season, oh, when you've blah, 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 when we're ready. What does that mean, right? All these conditional yeses. So now your job is to keep that discussion open. We call it the pushback in the ask. But I think one of my hallmarks as a general counsel, as a lawyer, was maintaining my relationship so I could go back and continue the discussion and negotiations. And this is also true in career. And we know that women, there's not a lot of data on this, but there is some research, I think it's out of the UK, where they looked at high-level candidates, like VP who's going for the CEO job. When the man doesn't get the job, he is more likely to say, oh, it was them, and continue interviewing for CEO jobs. The woman is more likely to take a break. We don't want the break. When the answer feels like no, we don't want to go back and talk to our friends and mull about it and say, oh, it wasn't right for me. We want to take our energy and our fuel, and we want to put it into, well, what do you feel needs to happen in the next 6 months for me to have that opportunity? When can we meet again? Could we, I need to do those things. How can we make that happen, right? How do we take that no that feels so hurtful and judgmental and turn it into what I call like a roadmap of success, right? How do we discover those steps? Now, sometimes you're going to find out that this manager, this boss, they're not giving you anything. You get nothing, right? So what do? You say, oh, that didn't work. That method I heard, it didn't work. Guess what? You learned a lot. You are not going anywhere. You are not getting that increase. You are not getting that advancement. And you do not have a promoter in your manager. Can you make a lateral move in your organization? Can you sort of back off a little on your job and start doing more training on the side or gig work to get experience? What do you need to do to get there? because you do need to find out if your boss has your back or your client. Maybe you do gig work, right? You say, oh, I don't know why they're not introducing me to other clients. Well, they don't think they want to, right? And you need to suss this out. It's your job.
Giselle, do you know what I'm loving about everything you're saying there? It's all about you're empowering the individual. So even when we're getting a no, it's right, okay, what are we going to do? What are we going to change? Where can we go? Who can we get? Rather than descending into a conversation about sexism. Because
that's right.
We don't care about sexism. We just want what we want. How can we get it? And
Absolutely.
And you're all about, right, how are we going to make it happen?
How do you make it happen? Because my view is that the companies are doing a great deal in the diversity, equity, inclusion area. But I don't know, do you have magic erasers in the UK? These little white things where you get scrubby stuff off the wall, right? So what I like to say is there's no magic eraser for bias.
Yeah.
There's this woman in the US, her name is Shelley Carell, and I quote her a lot. Many years ago, she didn't do the study, but someone else did it. It showed just a tiny bit of bias, right? Changes outcomes over time. So no matter what diversity, equity, and inclusion groups are doing, there is going to be this remaining, and we don't have magic erasers.
Can I ask you a question on that then? Okay, because when this topic comes up, we automatically think of the bias of the people above us, which are normally white middle-class men, right? Middle-aged men. But there's the own biases that we carry into the conversation. I think, Catherine, you gave a perfect example. So we can't control, and we can't really influence that much what other people are doing, but we can influence ourselves. So have you got any advice on how we check our own biases before we go into these conversations?
Well, absolutely. Yes. I mean, I love this. And that's really, so Chea Seed, I like to say that there are two types of bias that we take on. The external bias, we can't take it all on, but that experience bias, right? But the internal bias are things like people say, oh, I have imposter syndrome. I can't do it. I could never ask for that, right? I can't do that. Like, I want people to put that aside. And my viewpoint, which is informed by reading the cognitive behavioral therapy research and habit research, is that by just writing down what we do and, finding our favorites and curating it, that helps us find our power, right? And sharing it with someone else. Also writing down our plans, just like you have your clients write down their financial plans, and including in that their motivation. Because one thing is that everybody has different motivation. They might have the same plan. I want to be the senior blah, blah, but maybe I want to make more money. Maybe I have a lot of pride. Maybe someone else did it really fast and I want to do it too. Those are all different. And when you honor how you feel personally, it makes it easier to fight that internal bias. And then in Chea Seed, the content you get varies even within a little coaching based on your gender and your identity. So how you identify your gender. And we just do that by she, he, and they. And then we take the research and we craft it and we try to motivate people with the facts about the research to make them understand they're not alone. Because a lot of times when you learn, 7 out of 10 women, 7 out of 10 people, men, have negotiated their pay, but only 4 out of 10 women, you think, wow, I'm not alone in being nervous. I'm not alone. And when you realize you're not alone, it's actually easier to find your power. So I think the most important thing for women to realize is you're not alone. A lot of people are struggling with this. Even very senior women struggle with this. And one thing is that we look at the numbers of percentage of women CEOs in the C-suite as VPs, but we don't look as closely at their salaries. And the salary gap actually widens, at least in the US, the more senior you are. We know, for example, that women partners at law firms in the US make substantially less than male partners on average. Now, that's not true for every woman. But we have to understand that it isn't just about advancement. It's about asking for more along the way and knowing what other people make and then asserting your place there. So it's not just in the entry level to manager to director. It's at the very senior level. And although sometimes I give talks to young women in career, and they kind of look at me like, well, they're a woman partner, they make so much money. And sometimes they even say that. They say, yes, but that woman partner, just like we started, right? When she makes twice as much, think of how much money that is. It could be $1 million more, $500,000 more. What will she do with that? Who will she give it back to? Who will she invest in?
Yeah, I love that. Yeah. And I think this is it. Sometimes we think, and I'm just going from my own childhood beliefs, that if we ask for more, somehow that's wrong or greedy or going to turn us into something we're not. But actually, when we ask for more, we can do more. And then when I have more, my children benefit, my family benefit, my community and my friends benefit. So why would I not ask for more? Because it's lifting us all up. And I really liked, I think it was your kind of first part of that 3-step process, that it's not just a big conversation. How can I have more money? It's all of that preparation. How can I ask for more support? How can I ask for more sponsorship or championing? And just kind of practicing, kind of expanding and growing ourselves to be more comfortable. And Julia, it reminded me of, remember when we had Emma Gosling, this idea of girls in the UK potentially being conditioned to be the givers, the overgivers, and not necessarily.
We just are.
I always tiptoe slightly around the tulip. Sorry, Julie just brings out the
sledgehammer.
The sledgehammer. So yeah, I think from a very young age, we are not, and I think even with my children, we're not actively encouraged to ask for more, because that's not as nodding. So I think that's, what's the word? Blank, gone mind. Michelle, chip in.
Total agreement, I think. And I think it's sort of hearing what Giselle said, in that the more small actions you can do when you're younger really helps build the foundations for that career and your, financial path to grow. It is about empowering younger children. I know I've had it with one of my daughters. She had a job, and because of her age, she was paid so much per hour. She went to another job, and it was actually sort of £4 more per hour. It's a massive leap for her. And she said, Mum, I'll never get it because it's a lot of money. And I, and it's sort of, go and have a go. And she got it. And to see the pride that she had because she'd been there and done it. So if we can empower lots of people to do that, the difference would be amazing. And then we'd be on a set level playing field with men, hopefully.
Because it's not just the salary, is it? If we're getting paid a percentage into our pension, then every 1,000 less on salary is significantly less on pension. So, and you mentioned it earlier, Giselle, and we know it in this country, that we live longer. So we live longer off a smaller pension. Whereas if we can start asking for more sooner, then that's going to help us through our careers, but also through our retirement.
Absolutely. I mean, you didn't ask me this, but one of the most important things that you can do in your career is to think about that. Like what is driving you forward? Because that conditioning is from a very, very early age. It's the good girl versus good boy. What behavior is rewarded? How are you conditioned? And who does what job? There's some commercials now that I've seen where they show, like a woman, a fireman, but this idea that there are more women nurses in the US, and so these young women think they're nurses, but more importantly for these young women, it's how am I going to balance my work and career when they're 13, 14 years old? And certainly in college, every talk that I've given to a women's group, I get asked this question. And I've started giving a non-traditional answer that I'd like your listeners to think about, which is don't worry about it, because it's self-limiting. Because as soon as we ask ourselves, as we're going off to college, we're applying to college, in college, as we graduate, how will I balance work and career? We're not thinking about jobs that might have a lot of travel or difficult schedules. But when we're not burdened by that, why not go for it and find the job that gives us the most satisfaction, the most early pay, whatever it is that we really want, right? And if we do that, then when we get to the point when we're actually thinking about, I have to take care of a parent or a sibling, or I'm going to have a baby, we have more choices. So it's like thinking about, what is my motivation? If my motivation is to have a career with work-life balance at 18 years old, that might rule out degrees. I might not do finance. I might do something else instead. But now we're ruling out earning potential because of something that might not happen. But instead, why don't we think about, how do we find partners who help us share this load? And how do we think about having enough money to get the help that we need in our careers? It just totally changes the story when we think about what's motivating us and questioning those core motivations and internal early beliefs, those internal biases that drive us. And I'm not saying every woman makes that choice or has those feelings, but it comes up so often in these talks. I've given 25 talks since February to women, young women's groups at colleges, women in business, women in tech. And I can't remember one talk where this question hasn't come up in the talk or in a direct mail message right after.
Wow. I love the non-conventional answer, because it is limiting. And Julie and I see clients every day where we're looking at what beliefs they have around money that are limiting them. And that sometimes we forget the question that we're asking is its own limit in the first place. But isn't that where it's really important to have the network and that support group around us? Because my careers officer just pointed me alphabetically to a few careers I might find interesting, but never really kind of talked to me about why I was going to have a career or what that might be in. So what would you say to someone who's maybe younger, or maybe any age actually, about where to find the encouragement, support and network to challenge them about the beliefs they might have about their career limitations or not?
So I am a huge fan of LinkedIn. Okay. It's for many people, it's social media and they're not into it, but it is this amazing opportunity for a young person to reach out to alum from their school that they attend or they attended, to find people in the industry you're in. You can also, easily search up industry groups to join. The memberships are often tiered, the pay by what you're earning or what level you're at. They might even offer you a free membership early on, but it's this networking, making a regular habit of writing some cold emails or LinkedIn connects every week, honing your message and having a short ask. And I use Calendly, for example, to book. It's free for one-time slot. Have a 15-minute time slot and just book networking appointments and tell people about this slot and say, here's the question I have. Would you talk to me for 15 minutes? Most people will talk to you for 15 minutes, and then make sure on your calendar that you set it up so you can have 30 minutes if they're willing to talk to you more. But every time, that's a relationship. And I have this, vision that maybe in 5 or 10 years, students will end their college time with 100 connections because they started their freshman year. And early career professionals will realize that networking doesn't just mean being invited to special events or showing up. But one of the great things about this, video technology is you can have a face-to-face, but you can also do it on the phone. You don't have to have conventional networking at a conference to meet people. And worst case, you write some messages back and forth and you ask your question by email and you follow up with those people just as if you had a Zoom, right? But to me, we are under leveraging networking. There's some data that says 85% of jobs come through networking. So let's just throw opportunities into that, right? That's really what it is. If I tell you what I'm interested in next and you happen to hear, you might remember and tell me. If I keep it to myself, or I just think the 10 people I've worked with will know, I'm limiting my opportunity, right? Another self-limiting moment. And so that's what I would tell them. Put your ideas out there. Don't worry that they're going to change. You can always, every 6 months, send out a message with an update. Say, here's what I'm thinking now. Everybody knows that we're evolving. And I give this same encouragement to women in their 40s and 50s, like you're making a pivot or you're relaunching. Maybe you come into a second, what you view as like a second tier organization below where you left before, or you come into a role, a level below. The reality is sometimes to come back into a career, we're going to have to make compromises, but we're going to be strong. We're going to work hard. We're going to keep networking and talking ourselves up, and we'll rise up, right? So there's the networking early in your career to get your foothold and figure it out. Maybe later in your career, you know what you want, you know the pivot, but it's not so easy because maybe you have to make a lateral or down move or shift, or maybe you've been out of the workforce or for 10 years. I mean, this happens all the time, you know, whether your spouse dies or you get a divorce or you have a change of needs in your family. Networking, right? And then take jobs. That would be the other thing I would say to young people.
Networking and take jobs.
Yes, because 55% of students leave their first job, that job after graduation, in the first year.
Okay.
So there's no, you know, the early jobs are more like dating. Right?
Yeah.
Figuring out what you like.
What you want. Yeah.
Exactly. It's not a commitment.
No, and I think that's a good way of looking at it. That's an opportunity to test it, to build those networks. So that was a really, really good tip. I'm going to throw in a totally random question now that is nothing whatsoever to do with the topic. And it's just Julie and I's way of adding a little bit of humor, I guess, into our podcast. So, Giselle, are you happy to share the results of your last Google search with us?
Well, I'm slightly embarrassed because I work all the time now as a founder. So my last search for Chea Seed was yesterday, and I'm hiring brand ambassadors on college campuses. And I was looking, I realized I hadn't figured out not the money I was going to pay them, but the vehicle that I was going to pay them with. So I was frantically searching the tools that I could pay them with and sending them messages, asking them what would they be comfortable with yesterday before we had a guest from out of town. And that is my last search, not anything particularly embarrassing in the regular way, but too much work perhaps.
Yeah, maybe there's a little space for some non-work stuff. If you hadn't been searching for work, what might you have looked for instead?
Well,
what would be fun?
I have been looking at, we have in the US Adopt a Pet. And so you can put in your location, and I lost our 18-year-old poodle mix in December. And so I'm feeling like I will be ready perhaps this summer. So I have been, I guess, looking at adoptable pet and seeing what would be nice. I've been grieving quite a bit, I feel. I don't know if it was because she was my companion through COVID but it's been very hard. At 18, I should have known that she was toward the end.
Oh, good luck with that. Good luck with that.
Thank you.
I've got so many questions going through my mind. I could carry on forever, but I'm mindful that the podcast time is coming toward an end. So I thought I'd just offer up to Michelle and Julie, was there anything that you wanted to wrap up on or just ask about that I've missed?
I think the sort of the points that you've given across are brilliant. You know, I think to help anybody be empowered to get onto that sort of first rung of the ladder and keep moving and keep climbing is great. And I think, as you say, there aren't many things out there. So Chea Seed is really something unusual and something that we should hopefully be seeing more of.
I hope so. I mean, I agree. I hope that there are other products like this, right? We shouldn't be alone. We should have a voice, but that people will do this career tracking and get empowered in their devices where they're already getting so much help. It's hard for me to imagine that people can't get this type of help so easily. And that's really why I was compelled to do this and keep doing it.
Yeah, it's a fantastic initiative.
Thank you.
All right, Giselle, I've got a question for you. Okay. Right, listeners, any second now, what I need you to do is either grab a pen or paper, or if you're driving, you're going to pause the podcast in a minute and make a voice memo. Okay. Because Giselle, what I would like you to do is you were talking about these small incremental steps. So I want you to set a challenge for the listeners. So tomorrow, give them some examples of that one small first step that they can take. Right, guys, once Giselle's given us the ideas, this is where you pause and you go and write it down. And then tomorrow you're going to implement it. All right. So Giselle, give us some little steps that people could take tomorrow.
Okay. Tomorrow, when somebody asks you how you're doing and how you are, give your micro pitch. So your micro pitch is something like, I'm great. I've been working on whatever it is. I've been studying blah, and I'm looking forward to being this next, or doing more of this, or learning more about this. That's your micro pitch. It's what you know. That's about like what your experience is that brought you to that, plus the information you need to know or where you want to go. It's just 2 sentences. But instead of saying, I'm great, the weather was great, I loved watching XYZ show, did you see Bridgerton, whatever it is, squeeze in your micro pitch.
I bloody love that.
I love that. I'm
Right, you can
that.
guarantee
Wow.
somebody's going to ask you tomorrow how you're doing.
Yeah.
And we all just go, okay. And like Giselle's like, no, that's an opportunity. Get in there.
It's
Right.
Yes, it's an
I love
opportunity. And then you asked me for several things, but literally do it every time. And then, of course, if I'm allowed to say this, I hope you will download the app, because the only way we get better is by feedback. We have a give feedback little interaction in the menu. We get better from users who tell us what help they want. We don't offer it all, but do that micro pitch. It's so empowering to learn to squeeze it in, because the next thing you'll know, you'll show up early for your Zoom meetings or into the office, and you'll give it then, or at the next event, at the holiday weekend, whatever it is, at the graduation event. And the more you tell, the more people will know what you want. And when they know what you want, they can help you. They can't help you if you don't tell them. And you don't even have to ask. That's the brilliant part. You're just telling them, I'm so excited for, I'm looking forward to. You are not asking them for help.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Can I end on one little inspirational point? Just because you are likened this to a fitness tracker, and you did say something about not jumping into cold water, and Julie smiled, knowing what my hobby is. But there's a really interesting study that says when you compare men and women in short-term races and marathons, men do better until we get onto endurance races. So ultra marathons, and then women equal in the field. And I think sometimes we see that we're always catching up. And actually, if you look at it in the endurance and the higher elite levels, we're already caught up. There isn't a gap to brace. It's just a belief. And that is my final inspirational thought for today. But I loved the micro teaching, the micro opportunities. So thank you so much, Giselle, for joining us today. It's been really, really enlightening. We'll make sure all of your contact details are in the show notes. So if any of our listeners want to download the app or listen again, or go back to the previous episodes, I think it was 17 where we asked for more money, or Emma's overgiving, then do. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, Giselle.